Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of our podcast, which is called Sync the Chaos. My name is Lokaditya, and I have two of my friends, Suhas and Hari, joining me today. So, before we get started, why don't you guys introduce yourself to the audience?
Hey everyone, my name is Suhas. I'm a mechanical engineer by profession. I did my master's degree recently from Ohio State, and I'm just excited to be here.
Um, so I'm Hari, just like Loka and Suhas. I did my mechanical engineering from Ohio State, and that's where we three became friends. Um, I guess we've like completed sort of our academic, I would say like career, getting a degree, and then we wanted to basically invest our time into learning better things and sort of come up with a platform where we can share ideas on scientific advancement. So this is like our initial effort on getting started with this. So when Loka and Suhas introduced the idea, I thought I was very excited about it, and here I am, part of the first team for this podcast.
Oh, that's nice. I mean, I was thinking that I might put you guys on spot here, but that was some good introduction and an insight of how this all turned up. So, yeah, as Hari mentioned, this wasn't like less than 2 weeks ago that we had this idea that why don't we just record what banter we guys usually have and put it out there as a podcast. There was like a selfish motive as well, because if we have something to look forward to and record ourselves, then we be more productive in the time we spend in front of the screen, I felt.
So, that was essentially the reason why we named our podcast Sync the Chaos, where sync is a short form for synchronize. And our main goal behind this is to bring some synergy to the plethora of information out there over the internet. So, the plan here is to select a topic of interest every week and have a laid back yet informative discussion among ourselves over the weekend. That being said, let me give you all a disclaimer that though we are mechanical engineers, the topics that we chose are not something that we should be an experts in. This is just the compilation of information that's available over the internet, and here we are trying to put forward all the details that we get in, some interesting tidbits, and adding our thoughts to the set of information that we get over the internet. And the hope behind doing all this is we hope that these discussions would spark some interest in you and make you motivated to learn a bit more on these topics. So, without any further ado, let me share the topic for this episode. Today, we'll be discussing about the race to space. Unfortunately, COVID has taken the limelight on the global level for the past couple of years. It's been all over the news. But the year 2021 has also been a breakthrough year for the human race in our endeavors for space exploration. Numerous private companies, to name a few like SpaceX, Blue Origin, and Virgin Galactic, have proved that commercial space flight is not just a word for future generations. It might very well become a reality soon. So, we thought it might be a good idea to discuss the race to space, where we'll be discussing its past, like the Cold War between the democratic US and the communist Soviet Union, which went between 1955 to 1970s. Then we'll also discuss the present scenarios and the advancements and where we are headed in the future years to come.
So with that, before we get into the facts and trivias, I would like to ask my friends here to discuss and share some of their personal experiences as to what is the first thing that you guys, uh, first thing that comes to your mind when we talk about space, and like as a child, what fascinated you about space to begin with?
So, well, I can start off by saying that, for me, when I think about space, I guess the first thing that comes to my mind is the vacuum, the the emptiness that surrounds these bodies that orbit around the sun and these galaxies, and how big the universe is. And yeah, that's the first thing. And as far as the childhood motivation goes, I got a chance to visit the Visvesvaraya Technology Museum in Bangalore, uh, where I got to see few space journeys that were carried out by Indian Space Research Organization, and that was like my uh, first kind of point of view towards human journey into space. And yeah, I was also drawn to documentaries regarding this human space exploration. So I really found the topic very fascinating.
How old were you like when you started exploring these things?
I was probably like in my third grade. So that's like,
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, that's a very young age when we tend to be very impressionable, I guess, right?
Yeah. I mean, we were kind of aware about, like airplanes and traveling in the atmosphere, uh, but like leaving the surface of Earth and going to space was something new. And the way in which we accomplished it as human beings, using some kind of a propulsion mechanism that kind of made use of combustion process was like really inspiring. uh, yeah, that's like kind of my first close encounter with physics, I would say.
I mean, when you mentioned about this fascination, I was like remembering my own story. Like when I was a child, like I think second or third grade, hardly I knew the difference between continents or the whole mechanism of going to other country, flying to America or something like that was completely alien to me. Like as a kid, honestly, I'm telling you. But at that age, when you're exposed to a fact that people are going to outer space, and like my first exposure was the GMRT telescopes near Pune, which is essentially the giant meter wave radio telescope. These are essentially big dish antennas. Like if you remember as a child, like in our childhood, we used to have the antennas for cable TV, right? Do you remember those? Like there were these uh, spiky sort of
Yeah.
antennas, and there were also like a bowl sort of antennas that used to be there. If you imagine back in those days, those used to be pretty huge, right?
Mhm.
And I remember we were adjusting the angles of these uh, dishes on top of our house to get a good reception. But essentially, what these GMRT telescopes are like 10 folds of what we had at home back then. And there were an array of 30 telescopes which were trying to receive radio signals from outer space. And at the age of, say, 8 or 9, I got an opportunity to visit this place with my family. And one of the scientists there, who was like a close friend of my father, was good enough to like show us around and talk to me as a kid. And that's where he told me that they're trying to communicate with alien life. If they are sending some radio signals, they're trying to tap in. They're also trying to observe the uh, universe out there, which was like sort of a movie sort of story that he was telling me. And that's how this whole idea of space and interest in exploring space started in me. So it's somewhat very similar to yours, I guess. So Hari, how was your experience as a kid? Like, what fascinated you about space?
Mine was very similar actually. The first encounter, being introduced. Obviously, you cover like solar system and planets as part of your like syllabus when you're young. But I was really fascinated by my first visit to Birla Planetarium, which is in, I think the main planetarium is in Kolkata, but then I went to the Hyderabad one. So there, they do have a telescope, but I didn't get to use it. But there was basically a small sort of like um, indoor like stargazing, you know, setup that they had. So it's basically like a 180-degree, like a dome-shaped theater, right in the ceiling, and then you can just recline on your seat, and then they actually create the stargazing experience. So that was like one. It basically gave me that half-hour time to like sit and listen to the commentary and sort of contemplate about all these celestial objects. I guess until then I've not like basically taken the time to understand them. But that definitely like sparked my interest on. We see these stars on like a daily basis, but we often forget to ignore how far they are. Like the closest stars are like 4 light years away. I mean,
Mhm.
4 light years. The number four might be small, but 4 light years is basically telling us that like the fastest speed that physics knows of, which is speed of light. If you travel in that speed, it's going to take you 4 years. So any blink or any difference you see in that star,
Mhm.
that information gets to you only after 4 years. So that was very fascinating. Recently, like I also watched like videos on how our perception of the scale of the universe is so like messed up. Like you see in a very like a typical physics diagram, you just see like sun and then they just stack all other 9 planets one after the other. But then if you look at the actual scale, like there are a lot of videos. If you just Google like cosmic distances,
Mhm.
they try to like use like a football, like a soccer ball, to represent the sun, and then the earth is something like a pea size, and that is like few feet away. So once you get from, so Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars are like almost called inner solar system. And then if you place that in like the middle of a soccer field, you literally have to like go out like to the parking lot to get to Jupiter and Saturn. And even if you want to go like further, like get to you know some of the more external planets after like beyond Saturn, you literally go to the next like state. So it's in the scale of like kilometers, even if you use a like soccer ball to represent the sun. So all this the reality of all these scales, and just the fact that space is so vast and we often forget like embrace it, that just catches my mind. Like there's just so much unknown that we have outside there, and we are so much like limited by like the information like that can only like travel fastest at the speed of light is just fascinating. I guess that's what basically got me
And like
inspired
the
about
other
space.
thing, yeah, the other thing, just to add to what you just said,
Yeah.
the things get even more challenging when you realize the fact that the universe is constantly expanding.
Yes.
The scales that
Right.
we are talking are like constantly expanding as we speak right now, which
Yeah,
is,
yeah. I
Right.
mean, that
I
Yeah.
mean,
was that was kind of a mystery until like for a while, and then people thought that the universe would kind of collapse in on itself because all we saw was matter and it was gravity that was holding it all together. But
Mhm.
now we have like conclusive evidence that the universe is expanding, right?
Right.
mhm.
And it's actually accelerating
Right.
in the process. And yeah, I just want to draw one more point. Like coming to childhood stories, were any of you into alien movies of sort?
Oh yeah. I mean,
Eh,
more than Alien, I was into these apocalyptic movies where you
right.
have asteroids hitting Earth and then humans are trying to save the planet. Like,
Yeah.
if you remember the famous Armageddon, Deep Impact,
Yep.
all these
Right.
movies were
Oh, there's
fascinating.
one more from Bollywood, which was the movie Jadoo. No,
Yes.
so it's
I
Koi Mil
I
Gaya,
know.
was it?
Koi Mil Gaya. Yes,
Yeah.
Koi Mil Gaya.
Oh, That was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a kid, I loved that movie.
Yeah, even Birla Planetarium, I think I still remember, like it's in my mind. I can like picture it. I still remember seeing like an ore, basically, like that they basically collected. It's basically like comprised of iron, I think, but it was a meteorite that made it to Earth, like without combustion, without burning, and they basically preserved that in the planetarium as an exhibit. So that was also
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I remember I have visited that place as well, and I remember I was like
Right,
pretty intrigued. Like, is it something that is really from outer space? It looked like a black rock, if I remember it right.
right,
So as you kind of like grow old, like it becomes weirder and weirder, right? Like you grow up and then you realize there's sound does not travel through vacuum, and that's like a weird thing. And then there's no gravity in outer space. That's another weird thing. So
hmm,
yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive to what we see in the real world.
yep,
Uh, Coming back to the vastness of the outer unknown, right? I just wanted to say that whenever I'm stressed or something, I get thoughts like, "What am I in this whole universe? Like,
exactly,
does
yeah,
these small worries really matter to me?" Because I
yep.
mean, if
There's
you look
definitely
at
a
that,
philosophical bend to it. Like,
yeah,
yeah, we are basically like human centric, self centric, right? We
yeah,
associate things
Mhm.
that relate to us, but in I think in a larger scale, if you are viewing at the universe from outside, I think uh, you
yeah,
don't make any significance
yeah,
difference to that landscape.
yeah, yeah. It turns out that at least for me, it really helps. Like once you realize that you are a
To
very insignificant speck in this whole
yep,
space
agreed.
universe, all your problems tend to shrink, and that sort of helps, I guess.
Yep. And
Mhm.
also the time
Yeah.
scale, where, like it's all in millions and billions. A human lifespan, like 70 and 100 years, like, is very short in that scale.
Yeah.
So
Sometimes it
that
makes
was
me
some,
nihilistic, so I don't want to think about it too much. But yeah.
yeah. So with that, our personal experiences, how we got introduced, let's maybe talk a bit about the past, like maybe during the Cold War. This is when the space exploration actually started. Before that, we were just having like shouldn't say just, but we were fighting amongst ourselves, World War One, World War Two, and then after that, there was the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, which started off in 1955, where more than fighting on the ground, it was more about fighting with the technology, who is more advanced in reaching outer space. So we'll spend some time talking about the past of space race. So as we know, Russians were leading the initial half of the space race. They were the first to send out a man-made object into outer space. And I remember this tidbit, not because of any good reason, but because as a child I was forced to give these competitive exams, and the general knowledge section used to have some question on space exploration. And I remember like trying to keep this word in mind that Sputnik 1 was the first artificial man-made thing in outer space, and then Sputnik 2 was launched a year later by the Russians, and it had a dog named Laika in it. So these were the
I remember
two
that. Yeah.
accomplishments that Russia had, or Soviet Union for that matter.
Yep. 1957 October was Sputnik 1. Actually, it's November 3rd, 1957 was Sputnik 2.
Mhm. Yep.
What do you think drove the Soviet Union to, carry out this exploration to kind of like the space exploration, to be the initiator of the space exploration? Was it kind of a parallel initiative between United States and Russia, or was it just Russia alone?
I saw a video. Basically, it said after World War II, like the scientists from Germany sort of got split between Soviet Union and US, and after that, it was basically a competition to establish scientific supremacy, like whoever has more advanced technology. And both US and Soviet Union constantly wanted, they were fighting for the first place in terms of launching the first satellite, getting the first man on space. Uh,
Mhm.
so it was kind of a race between these two nations.
So the place where I got my sources was saying that US had announced its satellite, which was Explorer 1, that they will be sending it. And to retaliate to this announcement by the US, Russians said, "Oh wow, this is what you were also thinking." And within a month was when they had sent Sputnik 1 into space, and they had a significant advantage. Back then, US was lagging behind in their space program, and they had launched Explorer 1 in January of 1958.
Yeah, I
So,
see. Not long after Sputnik
mhm,
1 and 2.
yeah.
That's
So there
interesting.
is an interesting fact about the second Sputnik, which took the dog, as we famously know, Laika.
Mhm.
It is being said that though it was sent due to the heat inside the capsule, the dog unfortunately died within hours of going into space. So that
Oh,
was
wow.
something interesting that I found out.
That's interesting.
I'm
So
not
did
sure how the current animal welfare organizations would take that. I mean, that was brutal, I guess.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Was it unmanned? No, there were men in space.
I
Maybe
guess it
just that
was.
the dog was not accustomed to.
No, I mean, Sputnik 2 just had the dog inside it. It was a pretty small
Oh, okay.
satellite.
Then it's,
Mhm.
I see.
The first human thing that happened, this human space mission was by Yuri Gagarin. This was in 1961, the first man to go to space. So he was in the orbit and
Uh-huh.
successfully came back. So this was in April 1961, and the US wasn't far behind. Within less than a month, they had sent the US astronaut named Alan Shepard in May 5th, 1961 to space. But this is not a common name that we are known to. It's all Yuri Gagarin that we remember for him being the first person. But the time gap between them is hardly less than a month, which was
Wow.
interesting to me.
Yeah, I guess that's.
And then after this, US had made an announcement that by the end of the decade, they would be sending the first humans to moon. And the decade was pretty much spent in developing the Saturn rockets. A lot of money pumped into NASA, and they were the first. US was the first to send in humans to moon, which we famously know the Apollo 11 program, which took Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Buzz Aldrin to moon.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. So I see an interesting little bit of fact over here. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong, they skipped sleep and were awake for 20 hours on the flight.
So
Yeah.
actually, it turns out that during the flight, they were awake for 20 hours, and by the time they reached moon, they were advised to sleep for a while before they could start walking, take their first
Oh,
steps
I
on
see.
moon. So it said that the commander, who is Neil Armstrong, sent a message to NASA saying that we haven't come this far to just take a nap, which
Mhm.
totally makes sense, right? They skipped their sleep and they went for the moonwalk. And
Uh-huh.
another interesting fact here is that uh, in the past missions, the commander, in this case, who is Neil Armstrong, had to stay in the capsule, and the co-pilot, in this case Buzz Aldrin, should have ideally should have been the first person to put his feet on moon. But it turns out that the door hatch was
Mhm.
opening inward, and it was Buzz Aldrin near the door. So that made Neil Armstrong was the commander to keep his first foot on the moon, and that's how we remember him. Pretty interesting to know that just a door design made him the first person to step on moon.
Someone has to be first, right? So
Yep.
I'm just thinking psychologically, like what was going on in their minds, like.
I mean, just to maybe compensate for Buzz's loss, he had the most number of pictures though, because apparently Neil Armstrong was the one holding camera, and those were the days where selfie wasn't a thing. So
yes,
most of the pictures that you find on of the first moon mission was of Buzz Aldrin, and the only famous picture of Neil Armstrong was the one that we could see him in the reflection of Buzz Aldrin's helmet.
Oh wow.
it seems like he carried pieces of Wright brothers' first aircraft on board with Apollo 11. He also kept some after he returned. He says like it's a tribute to basically aviation and space science.
Yeah, he was from Ohio, by the way, Neil
Yep.
Armstrong. And one more thing that I came across was the bag in which he was carrying the soil from moon got like auctioned. NASA wasn't aware
Oh,
of this.
that would make
It got
sense. Yeah.
auctioned, and some person bought it for, if I remember it right, for $995, which is
That's it.
pretty low, I guess, and sold it for some millions, I guess. I have to
Wow.
fact check this, but this was pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, do you think those astronauts were cautious about quarantine measure, about kind of taking the bacteria from here on planet Earth to the moon?
I don't know about taking bacteria or viruses from Earth to the moon, but after coming back, they were apparently quarantined for 21 days. So,
Yeah.
though they were like celebrated heroes back here on Earth, they had to quarantine for 21 days. And apparently, the US president back then visited them through that quarantine chamber, which had a window to it. I think you can find pictures of it online if you Google that. After 1969, this first moon mission, there were a couple of other people who have landed on moon. There are about 12 people, if I'm not wrong. And the last man to go to moon was in 1972, named Harrison Smith. Uh, he was from the Apollo 17 mission. And after that, there has been a huge void. Apparently, US and Soviet Union decided that there is no point of competing against each other. They started building ties, and space exploration as a whole became a global effort rather than competition
Right.
between the superpowers.
Yeah, we see that now, right? Like the International Space Station has cosmonauts, who are essentially Russian astronauts, and then the American astronauts as well, working together
What? Yep.
in a closed laboratory.
Yeah, in fact, they have hosted astronauts from all over the globe. Like, if I'm not wrong, there were Korean astronauts, Chinese, who have gone
Yeah.
to the ISS.
Yeah, that's definitely a good step towards like advancing science. When you collaborate, it will speed up things. I mean, I was looking into basically how long it takes to get to moon, right? So Apollo 11, it took 8 days, and
Mhm.
if you think of like the latest one, so James Webb, it took only 3 days to get as far as the moon. Granted, you'll spend some time getting into orbit and landing, but in terms of propulsion and like energy management, right, and resources that you need for a mission, I guess with advancement in science, you and collaboration with all these nations, you exchange good ideas and you basically optimize things to make it better.
Yeah.
So pretty
Yeah, I mean,
interesting.
in fact, James Webb was a collaborative effort between US, Canada, and one more country.
Europe. It was Europe, right?
Europe.
I mean,
Yes.
not the continent.
Yes.
Yeah, the European Space Agency. I don't know the one in Canada.
So essentially, all three of them collaborated, and I think I'm looking forward to the first picture that it would release. I was checking it out. So they say that after getting into orbit, it would take like 6 months for the first
Right.
image to be published by James Webb.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess right now they are in the process of calibrating those mirrors for the telescope so that it
Right.
is able to focus the light on the lens. And once that's done, I guess we'll see really good images.
I mean, I don't know. Even though we haven't worked on that thing, I still have jitters, and I can imagine how the people who have really worked on it would be feeling right now. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
billions of dollars spent, and they have only one shot to go at it.
Yep.
Oh yeah. One
Yeah,
more
in fact,
thing.
it.
It's the Canadian Space Agency. Just
Yeah,
looked it up.
Canadian, European, and NASA. Right.
NASA. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, just that we brought up this topic, I wanted to bring up its predecessor, which is Hubble Space Telescope. I think it was launched in the 1990s, if I'm not wrong. And it was a big disaster. Like NASA
Yeah,
was being
1990.
yep. So NASA was being trolled a lot for the disaster. What essentially happened was they launched it, um, but it turned out that the images that it was giving were completely blurred. And the reason
Yeah.
for that was the main mirror on the Hubble Space Telescope. There was a manufacturing screw up by the company that was doing it. If I'm not wrong, the error was in microns or nanometers, but it was significant for the pictures that it was taking.
So essentially, like what happened was like NASA gave this contract to this company called Perkin-Elmer, like to manufacture those mirrors. So it's like you have the primary mirror and then you have the secondary mirror. So the primary mirror focuses a bunch of rays of light on the secondary mirror, which again focuses it on the sensor or the thing that senses the incoming light. And so the mirror is essentially 2.5 meters in like diameter, and it was off by 2000 nanometers. And
Wow.
so NASA had given the contract to Perkin-Elmer and Kodak. As a matter of fact, like Perkin-Elmer had asked Kodak, which is like a famous camera manufacturing company, to make up a secondary mirror in case the primary one does not really, function very well, or it fails. But they realized through a series of tests that they carried out, like the primary mirror was functioning fine. The issue was that there was some kind of a mistake that was done while carrying out the test. And so they unfortunately loaded up the incorrect mirror. And after they launched it, they realized like the image that it captured of the distant universe was blurred, as you mentioned. And so they asked another company called as CoStar to develop a different kind of they didn't make a lot of changes to the existing mirror. They built a clever mechanism to, like correct for these issues. And so it took like 2 years to, offset these issues. And yeah, finally thankfully we got to see this brilliant images that Hubble was able to capture. So it kind of shows the challenge that the scientific community faces.
Yeah, I mean, you were mentioning about the backup lens that Kodak was developing, right?
Mhm.
So when they decided that the first one was well calibrated, Kodak just stopped its production midway. They didn't have the polishing and all done, and that particular backup mirror is still there, and it's put in some museum, I think, if I'm not
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah, yeah. I think Space Museum.
I mean, though it was a initial screw up, I mean, the fact that NASA was able to send humans and repair that thing in space, I mean, I don't know, it's totally unreal actually.
Right.
And getting it to work, wow.
Mhm. When was it exactly shut down? Because I'm looking at a timeline. It seems like it still like gives them data and images from deep space. Like in
If I'm not
2017, it
if
found
I'm not wrong, it's still functional. So what they have been
right.
doing is the Hubble Space Telescope was having a modular design, and regularly they have been upgrading the lenses and the sensors. But that being
Yeah.
said, I mean, if you compare James Webb to Hubble, it would be like the a difference would be similar to the CRT monitors to a liquid crystal display these days, I guess, with
Yeah.
4K
Yep.
clarity.
Yeah, the technology would have made like a huge leap. So
Mhm. Hubble is not very far from us. It's about 547 kilometers from sea level.
right, it was
So it's just
kind of,
orbiting.
yeah, it was a serviceable kind of a telescope, right? Although it was in space, it was quite close and we could fix the issues. But that's not the
Uh-huh.
case, I guess, with the James Webb Space Telescope, which is, yeah, quite far.
Yeah.
And the design is so complex, there are more things that can go wrong. Hopefully, they don't do, but as an
Yeah.
engineer, I'm just thinking about all the things
Yep.
that might go wrong.
Might go on. Yep. Yeah. Hubble. So all the numbers that we see right now for the age of the universe being 14 billion years, and discovery of black holes, like the initial discoveries were made from data and images received from Hubble.
Mhm.
It was a pretty significant mission in terms of dating the universe.
Yeah, I mean, these are essentially eyes that we are creating that will enable us to look at the
Exactly.
space,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah,
Yep.
though
and
there is a lot that we as normal citizens don't know, but even like if you look at the horizon of new discoveries and the amount of space that we humans have explored, it's not a lot that we have access to look at. So these are, I think, small steps that we are taking is supposed to explore it further. That being said, let's switch the topic a bit and come back to the past exploring activities that we have taken up as humans. And let's talk a bit about was there anything useful that we humans have gained out of all these efforts, or was it just ego war between two superpowers? Because once the US and the Soviet Union ended their Cold War in 1972, we see that there hasn't been much, there was a void, if I can say, in space exploration. But in this journey from 1955 to 1972, all these rockets that were blasted off the surface of Earth, was it just the money being poured to satisfy the egos of these nations, or was there anything helpful that came out for us?
yeah, so I came up across this interesting fact. Uh, the digital image sensors that we see in like modern digital cameras, the CMOS active pixel sensor. It was invented by NASA, and it was needed for miniature cameras, which were usually used for interplanetary missions. And this kind of uh, sensors are currently used in medical imaging and like the X-ray devices. So yeah, there has been a significant advancements in technology, which has been partly or greatly rather influenced by the
Yeah.
human curiosity to explore the space.
Mhm.
And when you talk about cameras in space, right, one of the main motives that these superpowers had was to spy over the others. Right, the
Mhm.
US
Right.
had this whole parallel branch in DARPA, which was known as the Corona program. Interesting name in the current times, which was mainly intended to spy and take images of the Soviet Union. I have to look a bit into what they were actually capable of doing, but the name was a bit interesting to me. So I think that might be the reason that they ended up developing these digital image sensors to capture accurate
Mhm.
images, I guess.
Talking about the spying aspect, like what I remember was the U-2 spy plane and the
Mhm.
SR-71 Blackbird. So both these planes were kind of designed to uh, penetrate through the enemy's border and then capture all the information possible and get out of there as quickly as possible, or without any kind of, being recognized by the radars. Yeah.
Hari, you wanted to make a point?
Yeah, we were discussing how like the Hubble's major disadvantage was like a manufacturing defect in the lens, right? So in fact, the idea of scratch resistant lenses, scratch resistant glass stems from space exploration. Like the first formal like application of this was in one of NASA's own programs, where they basically coated glass with a very special type of plastic that's basically like a paste, but it doesn't affect the transparency of glass, so it's completely transparent. So the idea is, even if it gets scratched, the thing is it defects this layer that protects the glass layer that's underneath it, and this plastic sort of coating can be removed and then reapplied. So that's like one very sort of useful invention and application that was driven by a motive for space exploration.
In fact, one more interesting thing that I looked up was the baby enriched food, which we popularly known like with different brands. They advertise it as DHA and ARA enriched food, right? So these are essentially fatty acids, and these help in premature babies to develop properly. And 90% of the baby food that's being produced today is a byproduct of NASA's own research of developing these DHA and ARA fatty acids for their applications. So these fatty acids are naturally produced. These enriched food just act as a supplement for the babies to have sufficient quantities of these fatty acids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, adding
So were
on to
they?
yeah, go ahead, Suhas.
Yeah. So I was just curious, as in like the DHA and ARA, was it used in some kind of a space mission, or is it just a kind of research that was done by NASA?
Not really sure. I have to look it up and check what they actually applied this to. But apparently, it was something to do with microalgae that was used to recycle the waste. But yeah, I have to double
Okay,
check
I see.
again.
Yeah, Hari, you wanted to fill in?
Yeah, I was actually going to switch to another sort of very useful invention we made from space exploration was LASIK surgery. So basically, I think in terms of their like daily routine, sleep routines, and health monitoring, uh, they make sure in terms of like space missions, they make sure they can track the movement of like the eyeball in astronauts
Mhm.
and get some sort of like the health status or their activity while like sleeping. So for a long time, it seems like LASIK was done manually. So you can imagine how skillful basically the doctor has to be to just peel like the outer layer of your like corona, right?
Mhm.
So it was more like I think it was a very delicate art sort or like skill that like the doctor should have. But then like once NASA had this sort of automated way of tracking eye movement developed for application for using them tracking like astronaut health and in space missions, it was very easy for them to sort of just adapt that to come up with an automated system that can be far more precise and perform LASIK in a more controlled manner. So I don't think now uh, honestly pretty much all of the LASIK surgeries are done in an automated manner, and the invention of like the first step towards this automation attribute goes to NASA and its application uh, to basically monitor eye movements in astronauts. So that was really interesting.
I was
So
just checking up regarding the DHA and ARA baby food supplements, right?
Uh,
Mhm.
Turns out that this discovery dates back to the early 1980s, where NASA was trying to experiment with the use of microalgae as a food supply, a source of oxygen, and a catalyst for waste disposal on future human crewed planetary missions. That's where the roots lie, I guess. It's
Okay.
pretty interesting. I mean, nowadays, this technology is found in 90% of the baby food that we are using.
Talking about human comfort in space, right? Human
Uh-huh.
comfort here on Earth, one of the most widely used memory foams. You see it in all kinds of cushion and
Mattress.
mattress and stuff. So memory foam was also known as the temper foam, was developed by a NASA contract in the 1970s that set out to improve the seat cushioning and the crash protection for the pilots in airplanes and the passengers. And so today we see it like kind of in like it has kind of being used in the society as a whole.
Interesting. I mean, when you mentioned about memory foam, the first thing that came to my mind was recently I was looking up the prices of mattresses since I was relocating, and apparently there
Right.
are a few fancy ones which cost about $1,000. I was like, what's so special in these mattresses that I had to pay
Yeah.
$1,000 for it?
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
kind of,
uh,
I guess the memory foam is like it kind of adapts to your body structure, right? So it kind of gives a comfortable cushioning, and like the modern mattresses have like multiple layers of this memory foam of different stiffnesses, I guess. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, coming back to these advancements in technologies and alternative applications, apparently uh, portable vacuums, freeze drying technology, and thermal blankets are also byproducts of the space research that was going on. I found an interesting source that apparently NASA has a technology transfer program where they annually release a magazine called Spin-off, right?
Uh-huh.
So this magazine essentially talks about all the technology that has been transferred to our daily life through their space research.
No, but
So it
definitely
just
space exploration has like all these like space exploration apart from their main mission has given us a lot of inventions and daily life application products as a byproduct of those missions, which I guess they never really uh, aimed for, right? It was not in their plan or like in their mission, but definitely helps us advance or improve life on Earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
yep,
So I guess like that is the uh, way the technology works. Initially, it will be like kind of niche and expensive, but then as more and more human beings realize there is an application in the real world, we can kind of mass manufacture it and reduce the price.
I mean, whenever there is this urge of pushing against the borders and developing technologies, right? Like if I have to give an analogy, people say F1 is just grown-up kids trying to race. But
Right.
if you look at it, due to that whole concept of racing, there has been a lot of advancement in automobile technology, right? It's, I guess, analogous in space as well.
Right.
All these technological leaps that we take as humans, in future it becomes like the digital sensors that you mentioned. It's there in our hand right now, right? All the
Yeah. Yeah.
mobile phones have digital image sensors. So I think it's exciting to see where future takes us, I guess. And with that, I would like to start the next topic for our discussion today, which is what's the present scenario of how the space race is going and what the future holds for us. And as I was mentioning, there has been a void in space exploration. The last man to go on moon was in 1972, and till now, pretty much there have been some space missions, but it's been very limited. Most of them are unmanned space missions. And now suddenly in this 21st century, we are hearing about privatization of space exploration, and we have companies like SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin. Uh, in fact, last year we had Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin testing out their first manned space missions, which were both successful. So why don't we open up the floor and discuss how the present and the future looks like?
Yeah, sure, local. Yeah, that's a really exciting thing that is going on right now. I guess it gives us all a hope to look toward a better future for humanity. Um, yeah, that was. I feel like the billionaires out there, they are like doing a really good job pushing the boundary of what we know in space exploration.
When you bring up this topic about these multimillionaires and the big wigs, right? They aren't doing just for the sake of humanity. I'm sure they are motivated by their own business oriented mentality. I guess one of the main reasons would be that now humans are starting to realize that there is a huge untapped resource in space, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it might be one of the main reasons for all this privatization. It's not just government funded. They're fighting for like contracts with NASA and like trying to be the first person to tap that potential of
Yeah,
profit
yeah,
making, I guess.
yeah. I just got a chance to watch Don't Look Up, where you rightly point out that the businesses are, I guess the first trillionaire out there is going to be the person who gets involved in asteroid mining, because there are minerals that, which we find hard to mine over here on the surface of the earth, but on, say, an asteroid, I guess that will be more feasible.
Yeah, I think we've started sort of realizing or started using a lot of like these rare metals that are not in abundance in on Earth, but we can get those minerals from space or either manufacture them in space in a more cost-effective manner, right? So I think if a private company, from their standpoint, if you go to space, right, or if you have the technology and basically the capability of going to space and conducting a certain process, that means like other companies who already have a big customer base or need certain raw material are going to like be dependent on you to get that certain resource from space so they can make their products better.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So there's
Coming to space exploration, right? So I believe Luxembourg has a lot of companies that are getting involved in this. So why Luxembourg? And
Yeah, I think they started up putting in mining laws, right? Like
Mhm.
laws that govern who can mine, where they can mine and stuff.
right. So I think as far as like what I had read, it's basically that like they were the first country, I guess, in sort of collaboration with the US. They made laws on who gets to own resources that were mined in space. As Suhas had brought up, asteroid mining is going to be a very sort of lucrative way of like making money. Just because, again, since the metals or the resources you get from space are going to be the process of getting it is going to be so involved, intense, and also it has a lot of value. It's very interesting to see countries and governments come up with rules and regulations accordingly, right? So because once you have this increased inflow of all these resources, you need to make sure you have a way of, I guess, legally or in an organized fashion, allow companies or individuals to own those resources. In my opinion, like from my research, I think like in the past, if you look at all the space exploration we've done, it's been more like space for space, right? So you go to space and do exploration primarily for research and learn about our place in the universe and learn more about its evolution and its history. But I think, as we had discussed, so many applications of these that stem from space exploration, right? Like you had like baby food, LASIK surgery, and then like anti-scratch glass. So with all these inventions and process improvements, and with all these rare materials like being used in our day-to-day technology like cameras and like phones, I think the present and future is moving more towards we still have the space to space aspect of missions, right? We still like send James Webb, we still send like the Parker probe to understand celestial bodies and understand the universe, but we are definitely investing a lot on space for Earth missions. So basically, you go to space to do a certain process. We found so many processes that are way more optimal or even feasible to be done on space, just because you have a different advantage for microgravity in terms
Right.
of 3D printing or like printing complicated uh, shapes, like even like human organs.
Right.
It's so easy in space. Uh, so people have started embracing, or at least private companies have started embracing the usefulness in exploring space to benefit processes on Earth. So this is taking a big portion, and that's where we are seeing a lot of like private companies come in to cater to this demand. Right?
I do have a question here. So when you say space to Earth, do satellites qualify for that?
Right.
Because I
Yes.
just see that SpaceX launched a huge number of Starlink satellites. So we know that internet played a role where it acts like a nervous system which connected humanity or civilizations
Right.
from all across the world. Within a click of a button, you can get information instantly. So I
Right.
guess this is more of like in those lines, right? The
Yes.
Starlink satellites to connect the entire world and cater to the needs of the
Right.
Earth.
Yeah, how I like to think about it is it somehow connected to the manufacturing or the betterment or like enhancement of a commodity or service that you use on Earth.
Yeah.
So I would say internet is one such commodity, and if you send satellites in order to like increase the connectivity and your range of uh, internet across like different parts of the world, that would fall under space war missions.
Right.
Yep. In fact, we heard of Starlink by SpaceX, right? But there are also competitors for this. Amazon has its own project called Cooper, and OneWeb is another company that's trying to do something similar, like have a collection of satellites orbiting all across the Earth and have an interconnected internet for space internet for that matter. This will obviously give benefit to all the areas which don't have access to internet right now. There will be much more connectivity, but also there is this issue that there is a lot of space traffic right now. At least the lower range, there are a lot of these small satellites, and apparently astronomers are pissed due to this. The images that they're trying to capture are being fussed out because of these low Earth orbiting satellites, apparently.
Right. I mean the James Webb Space Telescope. The main person who handled that, he was mentioning in an interview that the future for building such telescopes should be in space. I guess this kind of points towards Hari's talk about space to space exploration, right? So space for space. So yeah, the future's telescopes I imagine will be assembled on a whole as a whole in the space, and they'll be uh, they don't have to face these kind of issues with the orbiting satellites.
Mm-hmm.
It also brings up a question in me that, I mean, obviously we are advancing, we are increasing the number of satellites that we are launching, but how do we manage the space debris? I mean, this is calling for a disaster someday.
Speak of space debris, Loka, I more think of it as like, in the only in the vicinity of Earth, because if you see things from the scale of the universe, even if you I don't know, even if you launch like 10,000 like Hubble or James Webb, you are I feel like given the vastness of space, you're not going to affect its fabric or what's going to happen in that scale. But I definitely agree that we should be aware of all these objects that we send to space that is still under the influence of Earth's gravity and is probably going to like revolve around Earth. So we should sort
I
of have a
mean, the thing is, yeah, I agree that the amount of debris that we are putting in there is highly negligible given the vastness. But for our future missions, like it's the same scenario like the movie Gravity, right? What if a small bolt is flying off and unexpectedly it crashes with your 2 billion project, and then it's all in vain, right? It's very tough to track all this debris that's flying all over. But
yeah, and the issue with these debris are that they are traveling at a very high speed, right? And so the momentum that it has is far greater than we can anticipate. So even though they are like few centimeters across in width or length, I guess the damage that they can cause can be quite significant. And so, and also this is like more of an unstable.
Yeah, I think this is just a skeptic in me who is like trying to put out a question that, okay, now we have designed this fancy James Webb telescope for like, I think it took 20 years from its idea inception to actually executing it. But what if that orbit that we are planning to send it to, like the L2 orbit, has some space, like some small asteroid or meteorite, and it's all gone in seconds? I mean, how do you ensure that something like that doesn't happen?
Yeah. So to counter that, like I see some insane engineering that has gone into developing the James Webb Space Telescope. So I guess we can get to that in a while. Hari, you wanted to add a point?
No, I was just gonna say, I guess they do something called external like space mapping. Take a lot of images of space and try to track as many objects as possible. And I think we've discussed this earlier, but it's not possible to get each and every extra moving particle in space, like keep track of it. But I think anything that is big enough to cause a destruction, I think you do certain amount of like calculation, and I guess you choose the L2 point or the L1 point based on I would say like it's space terrain, like how sort of like clean in the sense like void of all these space objects like meteorites or rocks or even like big objects are not on your way. I guess some sort of calculation goes into that when deciding what position you want to start orbiting.
Yeah. I remember attending one of my professor's lecture back at Ohio State. He used to do research regarding tracking the position of these asteroids, and the real issue starts when you are trying to track like really small objects in the space, and that's where the error in prediction, I guess, increases.
I mean, think about Voyager, right? Voyager is like pretty far. It's been I mean, we launched it about like 47 years ago, and it's still in function. Like, although it's only functioning around 20% of its capability, but it's well over the mission time that they had planned. And given that it didn't run into an asteroid or like a meteorite or be hit by a rock in space, for so long. Uh, it seems like space is sort of relatively clean in the sense like all these objects are, again we are going to physics in this, but I think just like a small sidetrack. But I feel like whatever objects, since they possess mass, they tend to get attracted to bigger objects like Earth or any other big planet, and like they stay in orbit, just like how Jupiter, like Saturn, has a belt. Uh, but once you go far enough from these objects, I think the expanse of it is like pretty uh, like free from small objects that can
I mean,
damage your
this discussion that we had also
right.
prompts me to this question. Like, till now we spoke about satellites and the probability of something hitting
Mhm.
them is very low. But
Right.
when we come back to Earth and like thinking of a scenario that 10-kilometer wide asteroid is coming to our way, like I think if the Don't Look Up movie, if you look at it. So
Yeah.
I
Right, right,
think future is also headed towards trying out things that can be done to mitigate such events. Right?
right.
Like you were mentioning, Hari, that we are hardly able to track about 40% of
The
the things that are in space. So there is a huge chance of something like this being uh, detected and being overlooked upon. Based on if we detect it early enough and there is something to be done, I think the future
Yeah.
research is also heading towards that way, like mitigative disaster mitigation, I guess.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Talking
NASA has
about,
this project planned in 2022 called as the DART program, right? So they are planning to
yes,
hit a asteroid which is far away from Earth just to see if they can deviate its orbit.
that's
But you were
definitely
adding
sounds
something,
resourceful.
Suhas?
future projects, like, I this is just out of like sci-fi. It's still a concept that, the power of imagination, I would say, human dreams. So we know that gravity is kind of like a main attractive force that keeps all the matter stable, or in a particular place. And the biggest challenge right now in like space exploration or getting payload to orbit is the cost, right? So if you want to get more payload, then you have to burn more fuel, and then you have to make the rockets reusable. That's what SpaceX aims for. And yeah, the gravity is kind of a big plays a big role on this. And gravity also has helped uh, life on Earth happen. So, but what if there is some kind of a anti-gravity mechanism that can, it can create a repulsive force, uh, uh, so that rockets don't really have to use fuel, but kind of use this repulsive force to project out of the Earth. So that's something that NASA and the Russians worked on for a while. And yeah, later they realized that it's not really a feasible thing. um, they were not able to achieve any such kind of a breakthrough, so that was scrapped. And talking about another
Yeah, but
such kind of,
you
yeah.
said, uh, so you mentioned that they weren't able to do it, but again, I think at this point we are being more Earth-centric. What if something like that is possible to be done in outer space? I mean,
Yeah, it may be. We don't,
yeah,
we can never tell otherwise, right? I mean, the physics around how black hole works, and the possibility of creating a wormhole. I mean, all of this is like
yeah,
mind-boggling, and we
yeah,
don't still have a unified way of expressing how the world works, which couples all the forces out there in the world.
yeah,
So yeah, I guess physics will help us get there eventually.
yeah.
Um,
Going back to space mining as well, the same argument here. We are just looking at it as a profitable outcome, like where we go and mine minerals that are like very precious on Earth, like gold or something else.
Mhm.
But if we think of it in a like more open-minded way, what if we end up discovering a new mineral there, which is, I think, something like the Black Panther movie.
Right
No
on.
one knows if something like this is possible. All these explorations might answer these questions, like these sci-fi movie plots, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, along similar lines, like Jeff Bezos, so Elon Musk has this plan of making human beings multiplanetary, having human footprint on Mars and Earth. And Jeff Bezos has this idea. It's kind of his childhood vision, I guess. I'm not really sure, but yeah, he plans on establishing space colonies for human beings in the form of what is called as an O'Neill cylinder. So it's like a rotating cylinder which creates an artificial gravitational kind of a force due to centrifugal action, and if this cylinder is big enough, you can kind of you can terraform it and essentially have sorry, not terraform essentially, but create like a habitable biocylinder rather, for human beings to survive.
Yeah, I think the scale of this O'Neill cylinder is pretty huge, but a miniature sort of idea, I think they're planning to start off with is space hotel or something like that. I think Elon Musk was proposing something like this, like a rotating hotel in space. Crazy idea. Any opinions on space tourism? What do you guys think? Like, is it a what you call a gimmick, or do you think it's really going to work out? I mean,
As long as the intention of human beings is to ensure that we live in a sustained manner, and we kind of like, there are some real challenges in the current world when it comes to population, or so if human beings can have like, or nuclear war, so I guess for survival of Homo sapiens, or human beings, I guess becoming multiplanetary is a step towards future.
Yeah, speaking of multi-planetary, I think there are a bunch of like Jupiter missions that are planned in 2022, because like Jupiter has so many moons.
Right.
I think we want to find like if one of the moons are habitable like Mars. So
Yeah.
so that'll be next in line.
Yeah, it'll be weird to have to wake up to see Jupiter in the horizon of the sky, the giant red spot and all that. Yeah, I guess it's new. We are so used to see the moon, right? We're so used to see the moon and the stars.
Yeah, it has 53 named moons. Can you imagine? So there are 53 of them. I think there's a Russian mission, Soyuz 2. The idea is to launch it by 2022 and then spend 3 years just to examine all the moons in space.
no.
Actually, no, it's called Europe's JUICE launch. Jupiter Icy Moon Explorer, JUICE. Mission is scheduled to launch in May 2022. Arrives at the gas giant in 2029. It will then spend at least 3 years studying the Jovian system, including 3 of Jupiter's largest moons: Europa, Callisto, Ganymede.
Yeah,
53.
Yeah. So I was when you were talking about moon, I was wondering like what qualifies for a object to be considered a moon, and so it needs to rotate around a planet, and it needs to measure more than 3,000 kilometers in diameter. Just a fact on that.
It's actually not that far, right? 3,000 is slightly bigger than, it's like Asia or something, right? In terms of diameter, like distance, pretty small distance now.
I mean, one of the major challenges I feel is, I mean, our technology in travel, making interstellar travels, right? We are hardly limited to our solar system. I don't think,
Right.
like if we think of interstellar living, I think one of the key advancements that is required is the speed at which we can cover these distances.
Yes. Yeah, James Webb did like the distance of moon in 3 days. So I guess that, yeah, propulsion technology definitely going to advance
Yeah.
And
and
if you
has
want
been
to send,
advanced.
yeah, and if you want to send out humans on these missions, then what
You
all sort of physical stress that the body
right
need to take in?
amount of radiation you are exposed to, and how it affects your bones and all your biological process. That's also important.
Right.
Yeah,
That's why even
Right.
the
That's why we
International
see.
Space Station has a limit, like of for how many months you can serve there, and then you have to come back to Moon. So they keep rotating people. But basically, coming back to space tourism, right? I think it's a good idea to start with. Like say Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic, like they're selling basically like a space tour package for like 45 grand, uh, or something around that. The thing is, I think, uh,
450 grand, I think.
yeah, 450 grand. It's like once you see like very like billionaires or really rich people promoting space exploration, right? It might look like they are like sort of lavishly spending the money, but uh, if you see a bunch of them do that, rich people, I think it will promote that idea among common people like, who follow them
Mhm.
or share common
Right.
ideas with them. And I think that is a good first step in making it prevalent, and the sort of changing people's perspective that this can become one day this can become like uh, daily become practical, affordable, and something we do on a regular basis, like
Right.
commute to
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mars or
basically normalize this idea of space travel, I
exactly.
guess.
And I think the good step to start with is like, yeah, market it as uh, sort of like an exciting tour to space.
In
Uh,
fact,
Yeah.
the list of people who have signed up for the Virgin Galactic
right, right.
tourism is like involves Justin Bieber,
Yeah,
Lady Gaga, and Tom Hanks. I think
right.
influencing people will change the perspective, I guess.
Yeah. At
But
the end
that
of the day,
being
How
these
said,
many
are
were?
almost
private. These are like private
uh,
companies too, so they are sort of getting back the money from the mission to make
Right.
the next one or something, right? So it's not like the
Right.
unless like they yeah, given that they put it into good use. That
yep,
yes,
sure. I mean, I think before we wrap this discussion, one question that I can't stop asking you guys is, I mean, given all these advancements and efforts that we are doing, do you think we'll be able to detect any alien life in our lifetime? Or do you believe in the fact that there is alien life?
I think I definitely believe there is life form other than Earth somewhere. I mean, given the vastness, there has to be. Like, what is the chance we like the Earth was formed and it just happened to have this habitable, or evolution took place and you had a habitable, uh, you know, life form that could like basically advance itself biologically and become so
Mm.
complex, just from a
Yes.
meteorite crash, as we had seen, right? Sort of.
Yep.
Uh, yeah, I think the probability is very high given the scale and the expanse of space. I do
Yeah.
Yeah.
definitely sort of believe, if you want to call it alien, yes. Like I'm not about like possessing superpower or anything like that, but some other form of civilization that's not
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
on Earth.
I mean, as you said, there is nothing special about us, and there might be
Right,
people like, I mean, something similar to what we are, I guess.
right.
So I would like to add to that. Like, so if we, so based on what physics says, like, this has kind of given rise to, like, so there are specific constants that need to take like specific values for life to exist as it has in the current, in the present day. And it's, is it all just a random mistake, or was it deliberate? So that's kind of the reason, or kind of the logic behind the multiverse, where there may be another bubble of a universe which has
Its
life
own set
that
of
kind of balances
constants.
out, yeah, which balances out the equation, I guess. uh, yeah, and even if there is probably an intelligent life out there, like a life that is far more intelligent than us human beings. The big question that arises is like, why haven't they, made contact with us human beings? And this is where like some philosophers come in and they talk about this thing called as a hyper object that is kind of like a filter. So until human beings are able to escape that filter, the alien civilization may not really be interested in coming and contacting us, because they may think that we have not reached a certain level of intelligence. And like in the present day, this concept of forming a society and working together, maybe, and overcoming this issues such as global warming, or whatever, becoming multiplanetary, may be one such hyper object that human beings will have to overcome to be noticeable out there.
I mean, that's an interesting place where we can end this particular discussion. I mean, more than concluding anything, I guess we have opened up a whole lot of questions and curiosity that you guys will go ahead with. I mean, before we close, is there anything that you want to add, Hari? Suhas, I think you wrapped up your point, I guess.
I would definitely just I would recommend you all to basically go through a list of things that was included in the golden record cover that was sent with Voyager, in the hope that some like alien form runs into this. So it's basically like how our primitive people sort of left cave inscriptions, right? It's basically that from Earth. It's like a message from Earth. Like uh, they basically compiled things that would define Earth, like the five like elements, basic elements, sounds of like water, images of fire, languages, and then some. I think they have some like music. Uh, they have the picture of Earth taken from outside, human reproductory organs, and then they have like images of like male, female, and all that. It's very interesting. If someone happens to come through like chances upon this in space, they'll be like, oh wow.
I mean, this again brings up a question like, though we send these things, will they be able to understand them? If you remember the movie Arrival,
agreed.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
To understand what the other species is talking about is another challenge. But maybe I guess.
What if they don't even have visual perception, right? They can't see or hear, but they use some sort of like, I don't know, light to communicate.
But it turns out that interestingly, if there is some sort of communication that someone is doing, you can at least train, like get the data and train a neural network or use artificial intelligence to make some sense in the chaos, I guess.
Yeah.
That's just
I think that's why we've sent.
I mean,
we've sent images that are visual. We've sent auditory, like sound. We've sent greetings. I don't know if they'll be able to read it. But we've sent music. It sort of like lists what the messages are. Like, are you well? Peace. In French, it's hello, everybody. It's just like this random conversations.
We'll encounter an alien with a French accent, I guess, soon. But I mean, I think the efforts should continue, I guess. And I don't know whether in our lifetime we'll be encountering something like that. But I think it's
happen at some point.
It's inevitable, I guess.
Yeah.
It's inevitable.
That's what I was talking about, right? Like the great filter that we as civilization have to overcome before the alien civilization decides to come and meet us.
With that, we'll end today's podcast. I guess there is a lot of editing that I have to do today or over the week, but I think essentially we are wrapping up our first podcast. I hope you guys enjoy it. And this discussion, though it was laid back, it sparked some interest in you. Currently, we don't have any avenues for interacting with our audience, but we are planning to create some sort of resources for you guys to like interact with us, share your opinions and thoughts. And if you have any suggestions that on topics that we can talk about like this in future, you're all welcome. So we'll keep you updated about ways to communicate with us and share your thoughts. But with that, for now, it's a goodbye from all three of us. See you next week.